All right, so we know that the test is coming up. We know that on the test, we're going to be talking, and mostly, I mean, there are some aquatic biomes on there, but I don't remember seeing a ton of questions on there. But terrestrial means land. Now, land, there could be questions that ask you which of the following ecosystems are terrestrial, and you have to click maybe one, maybe two, maybe three, or it could just be a one-answer question. So you do need to know the word terrestrial. I think I might have put that on the study guide, but I feel like I left it off when I was going through all the things yesterday on the front when you were kind of doing like a memory dump. You do need to know a little bit about grasslands. Some of the things, Caroline, about grasslands that I think you need to know is they don't get enough rain really to support a lot of really good, healthy trees. They can support some, but not a lot. They do have good soil. And then you kind of need to know some of the animals in the grasslands in America and some of the grasslands in the savannas over in like Africa. So that's something that's very important. You don't have to know every ins and outs of the grasslands, pretty much the stuff that we've talked about. If you know the abiotic factors, the sun, the soil, the temperature, and the water, and by water I mean most of the time rain, you'll be good. And if you know some of the biotic factors, you'll be fine as far as going through the grasslands. I don't remember seeing anything in there about prairie dogs like super deep, but they might actually have the prairie dogs as one of the things on there that you need to do. So it's something just to think about. We're not watching that video again. We're moving on. There's some grassland notes that we've already taken. Again, savanna, still in the grasslands. You do need to know some of those things. I do remember seeing some things about acacia trees. Do you have to know the ins and outs and how they communicate back and forth? No, but if you see the word acacia tree, know that you're still in a grassland. I think that's important as we move through. Moving past this very quickly. Tundra. One of the biggest things that I've noticed about the tundra is that you're going to need to know that it is extremely cold, and the big one that they like to throw at you is that how dry it is. I know yesterday when we were talking about deserts, because the tundras receive less than 10 inches of rain, it will fit into that category of desert. So it's not the desert that we're thinking of. In most of the desert questions, if not all of them, Corbin, that I saw online yesterday, when they're talking deserts, they're talking about sandy, hot deserts. They're not going crazy and asking you about all the types of deserts. But I definitely don't want people to leave fifth grade going, well, if it doesn't have sand and it's hot, it's not a desert. That's not true. Less than 10 inches of rain, you can be counted as a desert, but you may also be a part of another ecosystem as well. So we'll move through that. Obviously, I think we know the animals of that. The Arctic bumblebee does not show up on there, but it is fun to learn. The taiga. This is one that I don't remember seeing at all. I mean, I think I might have even typed in the word taiga to see if it would show up. And I don't remember finding anything about the taiga. Maybe I'm not saying that it's not important. Coniferous shows up. Conifer shows up. But taiga and the animals and the adaptations may not. They talk more about the trees. And they talk a little bit more about the adaptations that the trees need in order to survive in the taiga than the taiga itself. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the taiga, especially since we've already gone over it. Tropical rainforest does show up a lot. Harrison, it talks about how the canopy blocks out the sunlight, how it's dark on the bottom, and it's very hard for plants to grow without sunlight, so they have to find unique ways to get that. Like we talked about those plants that grow up other trees in order to reach the sunlight. It talks about how the soil is going to be very fertile because it holds all those trees and very wet, and how animals there live in the trees. All the things that we took notes on in class are very, very important for us as we move through that because it's something that we need to do. Let me lock devices to people that aren't paying attention. Livia, get on the right page, please, and thank you. All right. Now, tropical rainforests. Obviously, if they start to compare the tropical rainforest to another place, one of the big things is the abiotic factor of how much water the rainforest gets versus other places, and why it might be a little bit different in the types of plants and animals that live there. Moving on past the rainforests. I don't remember seeing a whole lot about the temperate rainforest. Cold, that's not to say that I don't want you to remember that it's temperate, which means cool. It rains a lot there, not as much as a rainforest. A temperate rainforest is going to be very different than a deciduous forest, which is the last thing we'll take notes on today, at least the last terrestrial biome. But it definitely can show up. We need to understand in a temperate rainforest that if trees are falling and decaying on the ground a lot, that the soil there is very fertile, which was in our notes from yesterday. The banana slug does not show up. I tried to find a banana slug question. Doesn't mean that they're not cool and interesting, but it just doesn't show up on the test, which is fine. The desert. I do know that they love to compare things to the desert because the desert is dry and it's hot and the soil is very sandy. They love to compare other ecosystems to the desert. So be ready to compare, let's say, the desert to the deciduous forest or the desert to the tropical rainforest. But Serenity, they also love to put in there, what do they have in common? Well, they have resources for animals to live. You have to have adaptations to live there. They really do try to push the limit on asking you these kinds of questions. So just be ready for them. I don't remember anything that, in our case, would be any more difficult than anything we saw on the study guide at all. So moving past the desert, which is where we ended yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, and we are going to start here with the deciduous forest. Ariana, the thing I like about the deciduous forest is if you've lived in North Carolina for any time at all, especially over a year, you have lived through the 4 seasons that we go through in the deciduous forest, and that is huge. Easton, if it's asking me a question and it says anything about 4 seasons, I already know I'm probably looking at the deciduous forest. We do have those evergreens, those conifer trees. Like there are pine trees out there, but a majority of our trees are deciduous, and deciduous trees go through that yearly cycle of changes that everybody likes to see. I know that a lot of people are definitely going on the roads now and going up to the mountains to try to see if any of the leaves have started changing color. I can tell you as a person that just drove through the mountains on the way back home over the past weekend, it's not there yet. I don't know how much all of that rain from the hurricanes is going to affect the leaves. Is it going to make it a bad leaf season? Is it going to make it push it back a little longer? I do know we need some colder temperatures in order to kind of snap that into place. Can't keep having these warm days when we're up in the mid 70s like we're going to have today. It needs to stay kind of cool and actually kind of crisp in the evenings for that to start doing its thing. But the trees will lose their leaves. They may not turn beautiful colors, but they're going to lose their leaves here soon because we are in that cycle of fall when the leaves fall off the tree. Again, if you were drawing a picture of deciduous forest, and I know that we haven't picked up our science cards in a while, but we will be picking those up very soon to get our deciduous forest cards and other ecosystem cards, and then we will have enough cards, Danica, in our decks to actually start playing the game, which is very exciting. I would draw 4 boxes. I would have super lush green trees for the summer, trees with a little less leaves, but everything's green. It looks like the tree is growing for the spring. In the fall, I would have the beautiful colors that you see in the background here. And then the winter, I would just have the tree with no leaves and a pile of leaves around the base of the tree. And then I would define that as the deciduous forest is where the trees go through the changing of seasons, and they've adapted to that. The good thing is, like, because of the way we go around the earth and the tilt of the earth around the sun, as we go around the sun, we get less sunlight, less intense sunlight. The days are a little bit shorter and the nights are a little bit longer, which I don't like at all because by the time I get home from work, sometimes it's starting to get dark, and I like to be outside if I can. The trees need to take a break. It's almost like they're hibernating. It's not the same thing, but it's very similar. They take a break over the winter. They're still alive. They're still doing their thing. They're still getting nutrients and water from the ground, but they're not going through as much photosynthesis because there's no green leaves on the tree to take it through that process. You can find the deciduous forest all over the world. We're mostly worried about us here in the eastern United States. It's not going to ask you, Lindley, it's not going to be like, where? What are the 5 places? It's not a question. If they ask you that, I think that's a ridiculous question, right? I won't put that on a test. If I see it in SchoolNet, I will definitely come in here and be like, gosh, you're not going to believe what they asked. And we'll go over it. but I've never seen that kind of question. You just need to understand what a deciduous forest is. Every slide I feel like I've gone by so far, it keeps talking about the changing of seasons. Do you think that that's an important factor? If you know anything about this, write something down about the changing of the seasons is huge. And spring, summer, winter, and fall. You do not need to memorize that there's 30 to 60 inches of rain and precipitation per year for most deciduous forests. And some of it falls as snow in the winter. I mean, when they say summers are mild, they have obviously not been to North Carolina, right? They're averaging all of the deciduous forests together. And yes, it can get to freezing in the wintertime for us because we definitely get some cold winters every now and then. The trees and the plants in the deciduous forest have adaptations to survive the changing of the seasons. There it is again. It is very unique. I think if I were going to do a podcast, I would have to think very long and hard about, do I want to talk about why the leaves change color? If I got in the car, Chloe, and I saw a podcast that said why leaves change color in the fall, I probably would listen to it. I would listen to one about banana slugs. I would listen to one about Arctic bumblebees. I would listen to one about how acacia trees communicate. All of that sounds interesting to me. I can't do 5,000 podcasts, though, right? Like, that would be something that we need to do in class. And it doesn't take long. The thing that it does take is everybody else being quiet while the person's doing a podcast. And that's the biggest struggle I ever have when we're doing podcasts. But soon, it is neat how, as in the fall, the chlorophyll breaks down as the tree starts to kind of like take a nap. And when that chlorophyll is gone, that's the green pigment that goes through the process, or helps the tree go through the process of photosynthesis. And you start to see, I guess, what you would consider is the leaf's true color as it then dies and falls off and turns brown, and then the decomposers break it down, giving the tree, that's kind of cool how the tree's leaves fall, they die, the decomposers break it down, and the tree gets nutrients from itself. I think that's unique. All right. Animals, right? Animals that you might see in the deciduous forest. You're going to have squirrels. You're going to have owls. You're going to have deer, black bears. You're not going to have anything crazy in a deciduous forest. Just your regular animals that you might see around here. They're not going to ask you anything super wild about the deciduous forest. So let's knock out the notes. I know a lot of us in here kind of got started. Again, there it is. Trees lose their leaves seasonally. I don't know, Garrett, if I was writing that down, that I need to write down oak, maple, birch, and hickory. It's there for you if you want to know what kind of trees are deciduous trees. I don't know that I have to, Lindley, write down that deciduous means tending to fall. But I find that very interesting that there's a meaning behind that word. The climate. We have a climate of 4 seasons. That is a very important aspect about the deciduous forest. Cold winters and hot, wet summers. Sure, if you want to jot that down, you can. The precipitation is spread out throughout the year. We do not have those dry seasons and wet seasons like they have in the grasslands. We get rain throughout the year, but we have a whole lot of trees. We kind of have to have rain throughout the whole year. We have rich, nutrient-rich soil. Obviously, that's duh. If the trees are growing that well, that means the soil is fantastic. Otherwise, we would see trees growing in the middle of the desert or in the middle of the tundra where the soil is not fantastic. Animals, there's just some there. White-tailed deer, raccoons, possums, bears, foxes, hawks, cardinals, owls. And the animals adapt to the changing seasons. If I have all of those things written down, I think I know enough about the deciduous forest to get me through and be good to go. And with about 30 seconds left for the folks that at home, they can smash the like button and subscribe, and we will be good to go.